If you can't pay attention, you're not alone. It's happening to all of us. The average office worker now focuses on any one task for just 3 minutes at a time. But it's not your fault. Your attention didn't just collapse. In fact, this book shows strong evidence that incredibly powerful forces have stolen our attention. From big tech companies abusing psychology to keep us online, to artificial lights keeping us awake, screens stripping us of our ability to read, and everything from financial worries to air pollution making it impossible for us to focus on what matters. We are living in an attention crisis. This book explores why this is happening to us, what the impact might be if it continues, and how we can start fighting back to regain our attention. To write this, the author Johann Hari travelled over 30,000 miles and interviewed over 250 experts worldwide. In this video, we'll first discuss the factors that prove our collective attention spans are worsening, then the most significant factors that affect all of us, and finally, what we can do to collectively start taking back our minds. But first, how do we know our attention span is actually getting worse? Well, the author covers 3 points that I think not only show this as a genuine crisis, but also start to show its impact. The first is a result of work done by a scientist who wanted to answer that question himself. So he, along with scientists from across Europe, launched the biggest study into this question yet, and what they found was terrifying. First, when investigating Twitter, they found that topics trended for about 18 hours in 2013, and only 12 hours in 2016. And then they looked at Google searches, movie ticket sales, and even Reddit, and the trend was the same. The speed at which topics came in and out of popularity was increasing. Amazingly, by studying data from Google Books, they found that this wasn't just technology's fault. In fact, they found that attention spans have been shrinking every decade since at least the 1880s. Eventually, they created a model that proved a simple fact. The more information available, the less we can process it, so the quicker we move on to the next thing. This creates 2 problems. 1, the faster we read, the less information we absorb. This is why things like yoga, which teaches you to slow down, can improve your ability to focus. 2, it forces us to multitask, which we just can't do. When we try to, our brain actually just switches tasks back and forth quickly, and this switching can result in an IQ drop of up to 10 points, which is a lot. But being distracted doesn't just make you dumber, it also creates another problem. By being constantly distracted, it's impossible to enter a flow state. Flow is a state of complete focus, where you become engrossed in one activity and lose track of time. People can achieve it by reading, driving, drawing, coding, and so on. It's the deepest form of focus we can achieve. Research showed that to achieve a flow state, you need to be uninterrupted, and the task needs 3 components. 1, the goal has to be clearly defined. 2, it has to matter to you. This is because our brains are wired to pay more attention to things we care about. 3, it has to be hard, but not impossible. Almost all of people's best achievements and experiences happen in a state of flow. It's why I first started to love programming. I can lose myself for hours, and when I come out of it, I've built something I'm proud of. But in the modern world, built around likes, instant messages, and notifications, achieving a flow state has become harder than ever. The most common example of flow for most people is reading. Most of us have experienced it at some point. You get buried in a book, and time melts past as you become absorbed into the world it creates. And yet, nowadays, 50% of people in the US don't read a book in a year. We're collectively reading fewer and fewer books each year. Now you might think, that's fine, I just read on my phone or tablet, and so did I. But the author shows that reading on screens actually lowers our reading ability. It does this in 3 ways. Firstly, the way you read on screens is very different to how you read a book. You quickly scan and skim the information, picking out just the key facts. A study found that when 2 groups were given the same information on a screen and a book, the group reading it in a book remembered and understood far more. And even more worryingly, the more we read short, simple text, the less our brain wants to read the more challenging, harder texts of books. At this point in the book, I was genuinely pretty scared. If we can't learn, and we can't work, I think it's fair to say there's a crisis. But what's causing it? In this video, I'm going to cover the factors that I think affect all of us the most, and are the most scientifically agreed upon. There are 3 we'll cover, and the first is the rise in physical and mental exhaustion. 40% of Americans are constantly sleep deprived. Worse than that, every one of us sleeps an hour less a day than we did in 1942. And I definitely didn't realise how big of a problem that actually is. Research shows that if you miss a couple of hours sleep every night, within a week or 2, your reactions will be similar to someone who's legally drunk. And it's not just your reactions that suffer. When you're sleep deprived, your body goes into a sort of emergency mode. It raises your blood pressure, makes you crave sugar and fast food, and increases your heart rate. This emergency state reduces your short-term focus, long-term focus, and long-term memory. It also makes you less creative, as your brain makes fewer connections while you sleep. Finally, when you get less sleep, you critically get less REM sleep. This is the deepest form of sleep and is when we dream, usually in the 7 to 8 hour mark of the sleep cycle. It's been suggested that sleep allows us to process stressful situations, and this process helps us to manage stress in the real world. This part really resonated with me. I've been a bad sleeper my whole life. And like most people, I say I want to sleep better. But this is obviously much easier said than done. And for most people, the biggest blocker is technology. Why is that? To understand why technology is so addictive, it helps to understand what's gone into the creation of it. Back in the early 2000s at Stanford University, a place famous for creating startup founders, there was something called the Persuasive Technologies Lab. Its goal was to take key learnings from 20th century psychology and teach its students how to integrate them into their products. One major learning was from B.F. Skinner's theory of operant conditioning. This theory states that if you instantly reward someone for an action, say with likes, you can condition them to keep doing that action. And this theory is everywhere in the products we use today. This class was so effective that the professor who taught it was dubbed the Millionaire Maker. And guess who one of those future millionaires was? Mike Krieger, co-founder of Instagram. When you realise that these apps were designed at a psychological level to be addictive, I think it really shows that our attention issues aren't all our own fault. Their sole focus is to keep you on the app as long as possible, because the longer you are, the more money they make from advertisers. Not only that, but every app personalises your experience and ads based on the terrifying amount of data they collect on you. One of the scariest parts of this is that researchers have found to keep users engaged, these algorithms tend to slowly show them more negative content over time. Humans are proven to stare at negative things more than they do positive things, so this is very effective at keeping you engaged. But these apps are stopping us from reaching a state of flow, negatively impacting our sleep, and keeping us addicted using psychology. So it's no wonder that by the time we put down our phones, many of us feel sad, angry, and frustrated. However, while technology might also contribute to this next factor, it's not actually the biggest cause of attention degradation. In the first scientific poll of its kind, people who thought that their attentions were getting worse were asked to select all of the reasons that they thought were causing it. The number one factor was stress, followed by a change in life circumstances, then sleep, with phones in fourth place. And of course, stress can be caused by many things. For example, children with traumatic childhoods are about 33 times more likely to be diagnosed with attention or behavioural problems, and it affects your attention as an adult too. A study showed that a group of farmers were 13 IQ points smarter after their harvest, when they had no financial worries, than before when they did. So there's no one cause creating the attention crisis. It's everything combined, from our phone to our sleep to our lifestyles. There are even whole sections in this book about our diets, air pollution, and ADHD treatments as contributing factors. When I was reading it, I added a sticky note every time there was a fact I wanted to include, and this is what it ended up looking like. So there's definitely too much to cover in full in one video. If you want to learn about the other factors, I recommend getting the book yourself, or you can read the guide on Shortform. Shortform is an app that creates incredibly detailed guides for non-fiction books. I use their one-page summaries to research new books, and their deeper guides as a reference to go back to, instead of writing my own notes. You can highlight and save key information for later, and there's a massive range of topics from productivity to psychology to communication. And as we discussed earlier, I don't suggest you do this instead of reading books, but this helps me to explore all the topics I'm interested in and then dive into one more deeply with the actual book. It also means I can avoid doing this research on social media and falling down the YouTube rabbit hole for hours, which, you know, you might be doing as you watch this video. So if you want to give it a go, click the link in the description or go to shortform.com/Tim for a free trial and 20% off an annual plan. If you're one of those people that haven't read a book this year, this might be a good first step. Because honestly, with all of these factors affecting our attention, it can feel overwhelming. The author argues that we need systemic changes, from changes to laws around technology to our food itself. Fortunately, there are groups fighting for these changes already. I'll include links in the description if you want to check them out. But to start, there are 5 personal changes that we can all make that the author has done himself. 1. Use pre-commitment or environment design to avoid switching tasks. For example, you can use apps like Freedom to block your access to distracting sites while you work. 2. Understand and prioritize flow states, using the 3 principles we talked about earlier. 3. Control your social media usage. The author goes as far as blocking his access to it for 6 months a year. 4. Allow for time for your mind to wander so you can process what you've learned. The author goes for a walk each day without his phone or distractions. 5. Prioritize your sleep. Think about what you do before you try to sleep and track it using a Fitbit, Whoop, or something similar. I've also made a free guide with lots of examples and tips on each of these points that you can get in the description. Personally, I think the first step to solving any problem is to understand it, and this book does a fantastic job of getting us a long way there. If you take away anything from this video, know that if you're struggling with your attention, it's not just you. This is the world we live in right now, and while we can make small improvements alone, maybe, together, we can change it for good. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Have a great day.